All righty, so getting going into module 6 for this week. So we're going to be talking a little bit about overview for the rest of the class, kind of dial in things for next week as well as you guys kind of get going because we've got um, the final financial plan that we're going to be looking at try to making finishing touches on. It's always in a capstone class, it is always a little bit I would like to say that we're all doing a good job of taking maybe the assignments and then your recommendations. And of course, as we look through it and give you grades, I usually try to make a few comments on things that are good, should be kept and adopted, and maybe things that uh, just need a little bit tweaking or improvement on. And so, in a perfect world, we'd probably all just be going through and making those changes in time, but that's probably not the case. So, this next week, we're going to be asking you guys to go ahead and create not only that final polished financial plan, but then also create a short, basically consultation video with the client. And so, going ahead and doing that on Zoom, or I guess you could record it on any video option that you have on there, and then kind of presenting that to them, being able to explain a little bit more in detail, just through not dialogue, but through words of what you want them to see, and so that's going to be given a little more in depth with the assignment info here. So if you go under the financial plan, we're going to kind of have that laid out. And so I think that's probably going to be best if we do videos via Zoom. I would be happy to meet with any of you individually as well. If you wanted to give me a little, short clip of what you're wanting to do, or even give your presentation if you felt more comfortable with me in person, I can do that, or not in person on Zoom. Um, However, probably the easiest thing would be for you to do it on your own time, in your own space, because so basically what you're doing is you're choosing three of the six aspects that we've went over, whichever three you want. And so it does seem like when you choose three, a lot of times people think you would choose the same three across the whole class, but it's pretty interesting that some people, even consider estate planning or tax planning, things that maybe I wouldn't have chosen if I was a student. Some students really feel like they have a good grasp on that, and so they would rather present on those. And so this gives pretty good simple details on what's kind of expected. We have the rubric here. And so I just want to start looking ahead to that, right? See what the next step is. And so you can kind of see exactly what we're getting judged on, so to speak. Obviously you'll want to um make sure that you're, appropriately dressed, kind of like, ready for a presentation. And then of course make sure that you're, going through the plan in the right way, being able to talk over the things that you have written. And a lot of times I think maybe it's a good litmus test for us, because you can't give all description in writing for recommendations, right? Sometimes they will, it'd be too much if you were to just spell it out for people in paragraph form. But being able to talk over your different highlighted options, maybe speak a little bit more on things that you want to emphasize, and give takeaways to, is very, very important. And so this aspect of financial planning is really integral. We want to be people who speak clearly and directly to clients, have a sense that we're you won't, I guess you won't get that with this, but a good listener, someone who is genuinely concerned in them as a human, not just in the ways that maybe their assets would flow into things. So you'll see the timeline is 18 to 25 minutes. I don't think you'll have any problem with getting to 18 minutes, but do try, if you're long-winded, not to go over. And then upload those to your Google Drive is what it's saying is the best option for you. So if you have any issues with that, just let me know, you know, in a timely manner so that we can maybe figure out an alternative, but usually that works well. I do want you to have a slide deck, right? So you will be needing to make some type of PowerPoint or slides. And so and one thing too with that is we want those, I want to have a copy of that just so I can look through it as well. And so go ahead and you can email that to me. You can attach it to the assignment will be probably the best, cleanest way to do that. So just wanted to go ahead and start getting you thinking about what that next step will look like, because that's a big thing that's coming down the pipe. That'll probably take, you know, between the polishing of the 6 parts of your assignment, kind of putting it all together, and the financial plan, and then making this video. That's the lion's share of your grade in this class, right? So, you know, we want to, I don't want to overwhelm you and act like, you know, it's going to take 100 hours next week. I don't think it will. Especially if you've been doing what you needed to all along the way. But that is a big part of what we do in this class. So take pause right there. And I see Jason, you jumped on. Hello, Jason. Joe, Sergio, Evan, Jason, you guys have any questions about what we need to do here for this assignment?
I don't think so. I think the only thing I just want to make sure. So we're going to hand you the final written financial plan, create a PowerPoint and present it and record that via Zoom, and then also attach the plan, the PowerPoint.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Yep. And I will say, in the how it's lined up in the assignments, the financial plan is one grade, the financial presentation is another. So the client complete plan is here, and the financial plan presentation is there. So
okay.
But yeah.
And I know one of the things on the written plan, it's like the balance between making it, you know, short enough and, you know, phase one of the recommendations as opposed to just doing, you know, a complete dump of all the things that you've noticed versus
Yeah.
being complete, and kind of your thoughts on the balance between being, I don't know, presentable and like something that the client doesn't overwhelm the client versus being, and you want us to be kind of more directed towards what they can consume or all the things you've thought of, you know?
Yeah, the probably, and this is going to be my personal preference, right? So if you've been in classes with Dr. Annette, he might tell you something else, but I would rather you take out things that aren't going to really drive the plan, right? If you had years down the road, maybe you would encounter these things, right? At that point, because we just need to make sure that it's not just a behemoth. I mean, it's already going to be a fairly large document with a lot of working parts. So I don't have any issue with you taking some things out and not trying to just fill it up with pages and pages of documents or tables or appendices. You know, so, and many of them will flow together, right? So if you can unify it, if you've got the time or the space to kind of put together like, hey, listen, here's a recommendation that's going to flow through tax planning and retirement planning and investment planning, you know, so you've got really one recommendation that's showing up 3 different times because it has implication for all those different factors. You know, it's going to be kind of like that, because if you really think about it, right, you think about the especially those estate planning, tax planning, retirement planning. Retirement planning is going to be very similar to those. There's a chance you'll have some overlap. So you know, you can put it in one space and maybe go ahead and add a little, you know, in parentheses that this is also something that will help them for their tax situation because of this and that as well. So, but shorter is probably going to be better. Yeah. So 190 recommendations
Right.
in a plan is it's possible. you know, for all the things we've went over in this class. But I don't have enough time for that. I don't think you do either. So in the end,
Yeah,
it should
yeah,
hopefully be a time saver for you if you cut out some things.
okay.
Anything else? So today we will be talking about we'll be talking about insurance planning. Before we get into that, you know, it's been kind of a habit to go back over and look a little bit into the recommendations that we made from last week. And so I have kind of perused through those with you, with those of you that have went ahead and submitted. And quite a few people have gotten those in. So is there anything in terms of the investment planning side of things that, with our minds on it, as you guys have just been finishing up that you had questions on?
No, I get my only thoughts is at what level do you go from an investment planning? Do you actually kind of give them a, a portfolio high level? Do you go into specific funds? Do you go into a specific stocks if you want to even go that deep? Or is it just usually at the fund level that you select the funds and the percentage and amount that's going into fund? Is that kind of where you typically go from an investment? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair question. So are you thinking more, Joe, for this project, or are you thinking just in general?
Actually, just in general, I'm
Yeah.
curious because
Yeah.
how often do you go into the individual stocks? Because I know a lot of people have ideas about stocks, but it's kind of
Yeah.
like gambling unless you really know the details of a stock, which most people
Yeah,
don't.
so for us, to be honest, we put our recommendations, you know, after we present a formal recommendation to our clients, as they're trying to figure out if they're going to be working with us. It takes a while to get through all of the different working parts, the things they might need to do or make changes on. And so allocations and investment obviously is a very, very important part of what you're doing, especially if someone's choosing to move a retirement account, say, to your management. And so um, we make sure to give them all that literature, and we put it in the back of the kind of the handout binder thing that we give them. It depends on the client, as I've said, and maybe it's just the type of clients that we work with, but a lot of them are fairly overwhelmed by the time we get to the point when would want to start talking investments. So we never try to gloss it over real fast, but we're always like quick to tell them this is going to be something that we give you a little bit more information on as we go on. And some people will want more in the moment as they're trying to make a decision, you know, if they wanted to work with us. But a lot of them are like, oh man, you know, it's been an hour and 15 or hour and 30 minutes. They're kind of maxed out in terms of thinking through the financial future. And so, you know, at that point it becomes you know, a conversation that we're going to have a little bit later down the road, because you can't consume it all at once. And so, you know, that's a financial education thing that really what it does for then is it really comes down to trust. You know, if they're going to be able to trust you with their investments, letting you make good decisions, then in the end, they're going to trust that you put their money in the right place. But it's a totally fitting question, right? Because right now, like this last week, you know how it's been. So if you've had paid any attention to markets, you know, today is down 3%, Friday was down 3%, and it kind of came out of the blue with news that, like, we at work were, after the news came out, we're not really even anticipating much at all effect in the markets, and the reactionary side of the emotionalism and things that kind of get caught up in, apparently it is a big deal. And so you know, at that point, you've kind of you either primed your clients to understand that the market, what's going on when you're investing them in that, and it's an easier process, or you haven't done that well, and it becomes a really challenging, burdensome issue, right? Because people see account values go down. They see, hey, I just started my retirement. I've, put it with you guys. You took me out of a target date fund and you put me into a mix of stock and bonds, and that stock portfolio is really stinking up the joint right now. And now I'm supposed to live off this for the next 30 years is a question that we've gotten, right? Just in this last couple days. And so you really have to try to begin that education process with them sooner than later. And that doesn't really even have to do with portfolio allocation, right? And so, we're happy to be able to go into the weeds with them. But usually it doesn't involve talking over individual stocks or securities, because we live, at least at our work, mostly, especially in retirement accounts with collections of ETFs and index funds. And so we don't have too many portfolios that have individual securities. Now in taxable accounts, we'll do some direct indexing. But that's not really complex stuff. It's not really like heavy on the anything other than the fact that we are usually kind of under the world of efficient markets, at least a semi strong thought that in the end, if you have a diversified portfolio that captures the majority of the market, if you're able to spread out just a little bit in the small and mid cap and international, and you're able to prime people for understanding that when markets are down, it's a good opportunity to get in, not get out, then that's kind of the biggest things for us. Because I'll tell you, Joe, it's like today was like, oh man, this was the Monday of all Mondays, right? Like usually I feel like on Fridays when you have this kind of stuff, people forget, kind of the markets almost forget over the weekend. And it just didn't happen. It's like Monday came, and well, I guess it all started maybe in Japan, but
Yeah, when I saw the Nikkei last night, I'm like, oh no.
yeah, it's just like we're in for a long week. I had been gone out of the office too, and so I was like, shoot, you get back from vacation, it's always like, oh, this is a tough Monday. So yeah, and all that stuff coming up, and yeah, a lot of clients that are just going to be needy that kind of come out of the woodwork. So we read a lot of Nick Murray in our office. Nick is a financial planner that really is strong on priming your clients to understand that the market is volatile, but it's also the greatest wealth producing vehicle that's ever been created. And so we're firm believers in trying to like get your clients to the point where they understand the market will always be 2 step forward, 1 step back, right? We don't know when the 1 step back will be. Sometimes it might even be 2 steps back. But helping them to just kind of understand that market, the psychology that you have to have going into it, and then trusting that in the long run, and you can show them the stats, you can show them the, over 10-year time periods, markets never really see drawdowns. And I think sometimes those things are necessary, but really the trust component is pretty strong in that, which I know is not a, revolutionary thought, but it is true because we went through that this week. And so we weren't overwhelmed with phone calls, but got a few. So it was actually, in some ways, didn't end up being a bad of a day, even though for markets it was for us. But yeah. Yeah, the portfolio management side of things is not like something that we probably try to hang our hat on. In many ways, I think a lot of times we downplay that role that we have, just because we want people to understand that we're not just investment managers. We're not just going to be doing advising for accounts, but instead we're going to try to build them a plan and see what's behind it, which I think is the right way to do financial planning if I had the choice. So that's a really good question, Joe. Anything else from the investment side of things? Speaking of their Bitcoin holding, I don't know if any of you guys were making recommendations on that and then saw what Bitcoin started doing over the weekend, but that may maybe make you change your mind.
What did it do? I actually wasn't tracking it.
I mean, it got pummeled. Yeah, I think it's now below 50,000. So when it untethers itself, from needing to go up when market goes up and go down when market goes down, maybe it'll be more special. But right now it's almost a market. It's almost like a 3x leverage situation. If the market's down 5%, it's down 15. And so I think it's down, it might be down 20. I'm not too sure, um, but yeah, I mean, that would be a tough place for this household. I would have a tough time if I had a lot of money in it. Do you really want to be in something that is that volatile because you see it every day and your contentment in many ways might be dependent upon it holding in there. So some of you that said maybe don't get out or don't worry. Slow. I mean, I've even said this, right? Slowly get out over times that make sense. Like maybe it's best to exit scene completely. I don't know if we have enough information in their profile to let us know that they're wildly stressed about it, right? Like that it's ruining their lives, but it can. Like I've told you before, I've seen it from people who don't have nearly as much in their account as these people do. So
I think it comes back to what percentage of your portfolio do you want to have in a single egg?
right.
I mean, it used to be 4%, but that was widely widely kind of conservative. And when you have these high flying stocks that can quickly get above that, but that's kind of a philosophical.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even outside of the all the crypto or anything, right? Like
Mhm.
if you chose to invest in Nvidia 10 years ago, it might be the same case. You know, or Apple 15 years ago, Microsoft 20 years ago, all these situations could potentially get to a point where if you don't rebalance at least a little bit, you're putting it all in one spot that can be dangerous. So you have that single investment risk, which you don't want. And that's really what our argument is why we do more indexing in the ETF investing, right? Because you know, you start asking the question, should you be more in or more out of the Magnificent Seven right now? That's the topic of conversation. And so literally up till 3 days ago, it was like there's no reason not to be at least exposed, you know, at least have the same, you know, allocation as the S&P. And now it's like, wow, I don't know. Right? The Nvidia was down 6% today, so it can happen. And you have to be aware of that. So um not to say you can ever completely divest from it. Matter of fact, if you did, your portfolios, honestly, the last few years have been very bad. But maybe just a little bit diversifying, you know. And so, and the market does consist of more than just that. So having exposure in the equal weight S&P 500s and the small cap and the mid cap and international funds and emerging market funds are probably healthy. Anything else from you guys as we're on the thought of investment planning? Thought a lot of your you know, a lot of you guys did a very good job. The investment policy statements were good. Some of you could use a little bit of work with your capital assumptions in those tables and just making it tidy and neat, putting it all together in a way that's understandable. But I'll be putting out some notes on those hopefully early this week. And yeah. All right, let's dive into, I'm going to start talking a little bit about retirement planning. That's what's due tonight. I apologize. What's the retirement planning? Anything that stands out to you guys? Just they're very related, but
I had a question about just the Social Security. In the prompt, it said that they're expecting 3,000 between the both of them.
yeah.
How is that just them assuming that, or should we take that as fact that that's what it's going to be?
Just take it as fact for now.
Okay.
So
They're pretty young to have that
you can run
estimate.
what's that, Joe?
They're pretty young to have that estimate.
Yeah, so if they really only don't if they don't increase their earnings, right, like $20,000 in earned income. I guess the royalties, I don't know how they would work into that. But that's not much. And so that's a part of it. The situation is they might not have much in Social Security's earnings. I think the royalties would be included in that, but still, anyway, all that being said, we just have to make an assumption that that's going to be accurate. So the lion's share of their retirement planning is not going to be held in Social Security earnings. Kind of opposite from a lot of people that we see. Like I was showing you those charts from last week. So yeah, I mean, like you can go to myssa.gov and create a profile and then track your earnings history, and so that's actually what we recommend everyone does, for several reasons. One, you want to make sure it's accurate, but two, then it also will give you the projections out. And so what it does is it has a calculator where it assumes a slow, steady growth in earnings. I think maybe a 3% increase a year. So for someone, I mean, because of the fact that they just didn't make much money, $30,000 between the two of them is what we're assuming. So yeah, good question. It's not much, you're right, especially with inflation. It's not going to be much there.
My other question was, most of their income's tied in that CRUT, and it expires after 20 years. Am I understanding that correctly? That after 20 years, that's no longer in play, so they need to do something else to supplement that 55,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's correct. So.
And I'm not sure if maybe I should go back and change this, but for Social Security, I ran a few scenarios for them just based on different incomes and what that would look like under current rules. Should I just go with the prompt or
you're
is
good.
okay?
Yeah, just keep it. So, I don't think it's going to probably be. I'll never fall. You've done more work than other people, Jason, and that's good. That's fine. I'd use it. So go with it. I would not say go back and change it and not be worth your time right now. So, I'll be curious to see what those scenarios play out. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll meet with people who are a year away from retirement and have never once went on to the myssa.gov or even requested a mailed estimate of their Social Security. So like they've got no idea what their earnings history is or how much they're going to be getting. So it's like, whew, yeah, you want to get that figured out. It also, as a planner, it is a tool that we use, right? Because it's instead of going through years and years of tax returns, you can actually see their entire earnings history. I mean, it clusters it in decades once you go far enough back, but it tells you a little story about their earnings. And usually you see that slowly increase year over year, but not always. Sometimes people have had career changes and things that impact that. And so it tells you a little bit about their story. Sometimes people had not had much in earnings because they were, working, maybe a low paying, but a high rewarding job in social service or something, and then they start earning a few years before they retire and you're going, whoa, why do you not really have much? And you go back and you go, okay, there's the story, right? This person was maybe a social worker for 30 years and only in the last 5 years did they retire from that and move into something that is, paying 6 figures. We shouldn't expect them to have a large retirement savings. They were just fighting to get by on $30,000 a year before that. So it's a useful tool. Anything else on the retirement side?
I found one of the trick. What did I say? I found the trickiest on the calculators, making sure it was either annual or monthly, and having to go back and forth, and then going back to the calculator and trying to make sure I had the right number of imper and
that's
interest rates. That was like because the calculators were kind of mixed.
Yeah, it's so hard. The monthly and yearly thing is mixed up in our planning software. We have like Social Security is reported as a monthly number, but pensions are yearly. So like, you put a monthly in for yearly yearly and for monthly, it's always wrong. And then of course in the financial calculator world, right? Like if you haven't established, I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
my HPBII plus, you know, if you haven't
Yep.
established payments per year, P-Y, and you did 12 or done one, it's, yeah, that's tough. I've been there
Yep.
so many times, Joe. Um, yeah, like that's where it does help to have a little bit of like the common sense math, you know, like, oh, that doesn't really check out. If someone invests $5,000 a year, they should have so much, you know, in 25 years. And you do the math and you're like, whoa, that's not even close. Oh, I probably don't have the right thing number marked, you know, 12 and 1. I probably have it on 12 months still or whatever, vice versa. So. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about retirement, or sorry, insurance planning today. So as we go through this material, feel free to pipe up if you have any questions. It's kind of an interesting process going through insurance planning. If you really think about what we do in our world, a lot of times this is the first thing that becomes something maybe you farm out. If you're a firm that is kind of grown in size, or even if you're small boutique planner, you look to try to connect with someone in insurance that you can very quickly and, you know, trust and be able to send information over to them. And so at our office, we do have someone who does insurance. She does P&C, property and casualty, as well as life insurance. And so the convenience of that is huge. She also does our Medicare stuff as well, because it's not exactly related, but it kind of goes along, you know, with someone who can kind of mesh 5 or 6 different types of needs together, you know, and people, she doesn't have to go out and find, right? Like, especially Medicare, but even in insurance, you're operating in a world that requires this high level of public appearance. And so a lot of insurance planners don't really like that part of the marketing of themselves, or trying to stir up a lot of business on their own. And so they actually like whenever they can partner with a financial planner or even work in shop, which ours does, because it allows them the opportunity to just simply do insurance without going out and finding people. They're already going to be coming to you, you know. And so like today I met with a young man. He had gotten raveled up in a whole life policy just a year ago, and rightly so. It started like scratching his head about how this was all going to work out for him, and did some research and figured out that wasn't what he needed. So he's coming to us, and we're, you know, quickly being able to roll out a term life policy for him, see what those numbers are going to look, which are going to be a heck of a lot better than what he's in right now. And then also, you know, tie that in with some investments and retirement accounts for him. And so it's just convenient and it's nice and clean. And so that's a lot of how we operate. So yeah, so we're going to go through the life insurance process. And so, you know, off the top of my head, I think about this young man. He makes, I don't know, about $100,000 a year. He's a truck driver, but he doesn't have it's a 1099 kind of setup for him. And so you know, he makes a lot more, but then of course all of the travel costs that he has are assumed, and then so you know, into that he's only actually making 90 a year. So he has 5 kids. Yep. So but definitely some need for life insurance for him. And so we're going to be running some of these projections. So this little kind of the flow chart here talks a little bit about the different things that we're going to be going over, right? The client responsible, you know, are they really in charge of someone else? And so I think life insurance is one of those things that has become maybe a product that, if you really think about it, has kind of grown and morphed into more than just insurance, right? If insurance is the worst case scenario, you're okay because the group is covering your needs in the event of the 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000 chance. Insurance products have become more than just that, because they've become kind of a way in which an avenue in which people can become, you know, market products. So that being said, this is simply just a approach to figuring. These different approaches are there. Most of the time, I would say they're there to help you figure out how much someone would need in an amount for term insurance. So you have the needs-based approach, the income multiplier, the human life value approach, and then the capital retention approach. And so they all have their pros and cons. And so sometimes we run these based on certain circumstances. I usually don't run all of them, I'll tell you that much. For instance, I would say the needs-based approach typically is there to follow after someone who is nearing the end of their life. Sometimes people prefer to go out and buy life insurance because it's a clean, tidy way to make sure they have their needs met. So I said it's usually with term insurance, but in that case, that would be something that maybe a guaranteed universal life policy would pay, you know, to take care of those needs. So if you look at those needs, you'll notice many of them are related to helping someone really kind of transition out, not so much covering the needs of the life. So basically all you would do is add up those needs. So, you know, how much is it going to cost to bury you? How much is it going to cost to settle your estate, pay off all your debts? Maybe educational needs for your kids, other special things, and then the cost for the household, which we always assume is 80% of a couple, right? So whatever you're living on as a married family, or say it's just two of you, right? Maybe the kids are out of the house. 80% of that need is going to remain if you died or your spouse died. The income multiplier approach is a simple tool, but like sometimes it's easy, right? You just multiply between 5 and 15 times someone's income. That factors that it doesn't do a good job with, though, are like how many kids do you have? How much debt do you have? You know, the truth is people who are in sometimes the most leveraged situation with their personal finance, let me put that nicely, they're going to be the ones that need the most insurance. Sometimes someone decides to take the risk and go out and buy a business on their own, right? No partnership or anything. And that business has a big debt load, right, with it. You know, you can't assume that someone in your life or your spouse is going to be able to cleanly sell the business and take the profits and be able to pay off those debts. And so that's a situation where that person would need significantly more life insurance than a normal person. But I'd say generally speaking, this is a fine rule. You know, life insurance need is going to peak. I usually say right when your last child is born. That's when more people in your household are going to be dependent upon your income than any other time. And so at that point, maybe this is more like the 15. And then when you're 55 and you've kind of established yourself, you're really probably more self-insured than anything else. You can let some of those insurance policies maybe expire if you have several, or if you've laddered them. And maybe you only need 5 times your income at that point, knowing that your kids are all out of the house and your spouse is going to be just fine without you. Maybe they'd be close to age 60 as well, right? Where they'd be able to get a spousal living benefit if you were to pass. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and look at the human life value approach. It's always a really neat to be able to tell someone and look at them and go, you're worth $1.25 million. The human life, you know, I always think of human capital as the theory, the idea or concept, you know, that is kind of driving this, right? Our human capital is our ability to produce earnings, our knowledge, our educational ability, human capital could also be our health. All right, those people who are healthier are more productive and more valuable in the workplace. And so it's an interesting theory. I don't know if you've ever read, you know, or looked into the different theories in financial planning, but human capital drives a lot of different approaches that we have in this field. And so life insurance planning is one that kind of fits with that. And so you can see it is a little bit of a formula driven here, where basically what we're doing is we're looking at taking the, and I think there's an example. There's the income retention. Okay. So, you know, you're basically taking the present value is going to be equal to how much you would receive in payments over your lifetime divided by an interest rate figure, right? Like what would you be able to get risk-free? And so you would use that to figure out then how many more years do you have to work? You plug all those things in, and it should probably, this one tends to be a little higher, I think. Usually sometimes it'll put out, if you had normal incomes, like 1.5 to 2 million in life insurance need. I've had situations with people, you know, one that sounds like a lot, and maybe it is for again, the fact that there is a little bit of art, not just science or calculation to this. But like I've also sat across the table from people who have like one person I met with just this last year has 7 kids, and so her husband passed away and was just needing some help. And that's really tough, right? They had I think 130,000 in life insurance. And so she was just only able to invest maybe half of that after everything. But you know, just how difficult her path is. And has kids who are older in high school and now a little bit older, but still you know, that risk is really hard. And so in financial planning, when you're there to kind of offer people a holistic and comprehensive financial plan, anytime you meet with a young person, this life insurance does need to get brought up, right? It's actually inappropriate to not bring it up, because if something were to happen to them and you're sitting down across the table from their spouse, right? You know, you're not part of the solution at that time. You could have really helped mitigate that, and over the course of a career, that's kind of stuff you have to deal with. So it's something to keep in mind. Well, man, sad stuff. But I will say also, like we have we have tissues in our office, every office, no matter what. Always, it's like my boss's biggest pet peeve, because there are so many instances when the life events are not the good things and the changes are not good things that you'd want to meet with people about, but you have to. And so you just want to make sure that this number is good, it is right. I'm all like, again, about like finding the right value in things and not over insuring people. I hate that, like that expectation that everyone needs $1 million in life insurance. That's not the case. Some people don't need that much. Some people need more. But anyway, that being said, this is a heavy topic and something you have to go over, especially when you're working with young people, right? We when we run our scenarios, it's really easy in our tool to end the planning horizon in our calculators and just let someone die at whatever age they're at, and then look at the other and see what the plan is showing us. If they have more need or less need for life insurance at that point, we show them that. And so very, very simple. It takes like 10 seconds to illustrate. Do you have enough? You know, and I will be honest, in at least the plans that we make, and of course we live in a community that's not maybe as high earning as some others, but usually 500 to 700,000 is appropriate for the primary breadwinner in our area. So, but mortgages aren't as big, right? Like, and cost of living is a little lower as well. So that's part of the reason. So. Capital retention approach is very similar to that human life value. Basically, what you're doing, though, is you're trying to use perpetuity. You're not trying to assume an even payment to the point where someone draws it down to zero. You're assuming that they want to keep the value You know, hey, if I was given $1 million in life insurance proceeds, I can live off the interest that the million's going to produce and never really, in most times, not need to tap into that fund. And so this is going to be even higher than the human life projection, but something that some people might want to see. And finally, we've got the income retention approach. And so what that's going to do, and the little nuance or difference to that is we're going to maybe look at the income potential of the survivor, and go ahead and factor that in. And so kind of as you begin with the gross income of the decedent, right? Then any income earned by the survivor, the income taxes, all those different things are factored into that. So again, you get to use the time value implication and calculators to kind of figure out just how much they might need. And I'll be honest, again, this is one thing you'd want to talk through with people, because like I'm sitting with my wife, we're at a meeting with the planner. The planner's asking me what my goals would be if I were to pass before her, or pass early on in the next few years. And I would tell him that I want my wife to be able to stop working and be a stay-at-home mom. I want my wife to be able to pay off her mortgage, right? And I would expect that she be able to do those things, pay off her debts, you know, not worry about trying to juggle life and work. And so that's important. Whereas sometimes people sit down and that they don't have that goal necessarily. And so all that's going to flow into it. Really, if you think about it, that's a kind of question again, that is going to be, as you ask what their goals are, you know, they all kind of flow into one another, right? Because sometimes you meet with someone and only one breadwinner in the house, only one person working, and so you already know the answer to that question. So here's our example, all right? Larry's a 40-year-old salesman. He earns $90,000 a year, plans to work until age 65. He expects his salary increases to not just be inflation, basically, and is assuming about 25% in total taxes. Okay, so if you're going to do the human life value approach, there you go. You take those numbers, 90,000 divided by risk-free rate. Right now it's established at 0.03, or actually, no, that's the rate of inflation. I'm sorry. I would be the rate of inflation. I said that wrong earlier. But anyway, you get that number, about 1.6 million. Okay, capital retention, right? You take then the human life number and you try to then divide that by what you'd be able to produce in income from the risk-free rate. So this number is coming to us from that inflation adjustment number, right? So that's where you get that. Okay. So yeah, we'd want to do a life insurance projection for them, for the Doss household. Do you remember much about their life insurance off the top of your head? I'm thinking it doesn't exist, does it? No, they don't have any. Yep. Which isn't uncommon. All right, let's keep on going. Any questions about life insurance? Or at least how we're going to calculate insurance need? I'm realizing I should probably quicken my pace. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, a question I have about, I mean, I have lots of opinions about life insurance, but
Right.
I mean, part of it is being on the same page as your spouse as what the expectations were to be should what if something happened to one of you. It feels like it could be, it's expensive if you try to like make life, like especially in our area, right? I live in the most expensive area in the world, so it's like it's crazy expensive if you try to replace everything.
Yeah.
So some of it is just kind of it seems like there's no right answer. That's why I'm thinking through like the assignment. It's like they just got married. They don't even have a kid yet. It's like they have skills to go work.
Right.
Something were to happen with one of them, they still have skills to go work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably some need there, but I guess yeah, I don't know what the right approach is for that.
Well, they've got all this other stuff too behind the scenes, right? They've got a crut that's going to produce income. They've got
Right.
like so it's not so much. There's so many people that it's next week's paycheck,
Yeah.
or we're toast, and so those people, yeah, you
Yeah.
know, that is a real risk. Or
Right. But I'm thinking in this case that you're right. They have so much money
yeah,
potentially already set up that,
yeah,
I mean, we could talk through some of this stuff, but in reality, I don't foresee a lot of need.
yeah, and that's
I don't know.
perfectly fine.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Just wanna make
I
sure I'm-
agree. If you drop $5 million in the lap of someone in their early 20s, do they need life insurance?
No.
I would argue I'm already insured.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
really would. And so that's a pretty fine statement to make. But yeah. Honestly, Joe, I hadn't really thought too much about that, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. For this use case, this is kind of an extreme one in some case.
Yeah.
On the flip side, for the other extreme, I just had someone I grew up with that got in a car accident. She passed away. 3 kids,
Mm.
15 to 4, 15 to 4. No insurance, no life insurance. Obviously, she's 34, and now the kids got to live with grandma, single, and they're doing a GoFundMe, for 50K, which will help for the short term, but no one ever thought, this would happen. So hydroplaning on the highway and
Yeah. Yeah.
T-bone going 70 miles an hour. So in another situation,
Mhm.
so yeah, you would need it. I wish someone would have talked to her about it, but
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, those are the toughest conversations you'll ever have, honestly. Because there's not much else out in life that could be so bleak, honestly, than seeing the person who's taking care of dependents or their spouse or family, and then they're gone. Not only are you dealing with the emotion of it, you can't even think clearly, and now you also don't have you figure out a way to pay for the burial costs. It's actually you're moving backwards, making it harder. So yeah, that's really tough situation. So talking over a little bit of this, we want to just make sure you guys know the different aspects, of course, of the life insurance options out there. I've already given you a little bit of a look into the glass of my take on things, right? Like there's just so many young people out there who are their friends who are growing up decided they wanted to start selling some type of product, and so here they are. They've gotten a whole life insurance that's not really going to be able to adequately provide for their life insurance need, but it's also not going to really grow, but it's going to tie up all the free margin they have in their life. That happens on a daily basis. And I see on a monthly basis, people come in who have those policies, and we have to try to look and see if it makes sense in their plan. I try not to do my best into projecting on those things, because there are instances where there are more complex financial planning needs, where you're going to be able to look at some of these options and say, this makes sense. The 24-year-old who has been out working for 1 year, is not even married, and they end up getting a whole life policy for $500,000, paying $600 a month, and it's what happens is, right, the insurance cost means that the money you put into the cash value on the account is not really doing much. Furthermore, the cash value typically doesn't grow very fast. I mean, some of those are only growing at 2% or something, sometimes even less if they're a little older. And so it becomes this like people get very frustrated in those policies, rightly so. So but yeah, so then you have variable life insurance, universal life, variable universal life. And so a very variety of different, maybe more complex financial planning needs. But every once in a while you get into plans where you realize there might be an option. So like, you know, guaranteed universal life is gonna something that like maybe you start when you're in your 50s or 60s and you pay an equal smooth premium until the day you die. Right. And so it's kind of nice in some ways because sometimes it can be even a pension lump sum option, right? If you had an option to take the pension or take a lump sum, you do the math on it and you figure out that someone could potentially take the lump sum option, you know, or take the pension option and go out and buy universal life to make sure that their spouse is covered in the event that they would pass earlier, because some people fear that. They fear dying earlier from taking a pension, and then it's not one of those that has a joint survivorship rider or something like that. However, those products are like more marketed than they are needed a lot of times. And so there's also extreme costs up front with them. And so some of them can be, you know, pay out 4% up front and then 2% in trails and stuff like that, that become very expensive for clients, ends up with more money in the hands of the person who's selling the product than actually is growing in the account, which can be troublesome. So again, we look at the little flow chart here from the text to just kind of describe like what's the need in life insurance here. So those are useful, I think. I'm not going to spend too much time here on replacement analysis for clients. I think this is something that is useful. It's just in the grand scheme of things and the time that we have, probably not going to be also applied directly to the assignments that we have at hand. But sometimes these are pretty easy to do. I did a net cost analysis in my head with somebody this morning, and it didn't take very long for us to figure out what needs to be done. So ultimately though, like the goal here is trying to get to this little chart. Okay. And on this chart, it's basically trying to figure out the cost of $1 of insurance for someone. So the lower the cost, the better option for someone. So if you have an option between policy A and B, you should probably go ahead and sign someone on for policy B, because it's going to be the lower cost to insure them. And so then it goes into the details of how you can do 1035 exchanges if you have already have somebody in a policy and you want to exchange that policy for something else. All right, we're going to kind of dive into some other insurance planning needs. So this is the first kind of the discussion here is on healthcare. Now this is an issue for them. The Doss household mentions nothing about their healthcare need. Is that right? I don't think it mentions anything. Like they don't have health insurance.
It mentions that her extended families had a history of long-term healthcare needs.
Yeah, it does mention that.
And she's pregnant, so there's the potential for major expenses there.
Yeah, potential, say, inevitability, right? Yeah, so that's something that needs to get brought up immediately. So
I think they'd be covered under their parents technically.
yeah, I thought
26
about that too, Sergio, since they're not 26 years old or 27 now. Yep. Kiddom just keeps getting expanded further out, I guess. So there might be that might be something that the reason why they don't bring it up, but we don't know. I've seen it when you know your kids are still on your policy even though they're married and off on their own. But something that should be asked, right? Because they need it. They can also include that, like we had talked about in the tax planning. That can be an expense that gets written off. And so they could go on the Affordable Care Act. They could look at you know, what's the California has an option as well, right?
It's covered California, but it's Affordable Care.
It is, okay. Yeah. they could look into health sharing ministries, which are becoming more and more and more popular. So, I don't know if I've mentioned this before. My wife's been on she's on Samaritan Ministries. And so I think MediShare is probably the largest one. Samaritan Ministries is another one of the larger players in the field, but those are actually fairly good options. So we had both of our kids on those plans. We have not needed to use it much. My daughter had an eye thing that needed surgery. My son snorted a Lego once that required a trip during COVID. Yeah, I think I've said this before. But anyway, all that being said, like it's been really good. It's been a blessing for us. And so insurance is shrouded in this secret wrapper that you'll never see behind, even if you wanted to. And so their way they communicate with the healthcare system is supposed to be confusing. And so it's kind of a breath of fresh air that medical sharing ministries are there to provide transparency. And so we're actually self-pay patients. But when we meet with people, and it does require a statement of faith, it requires a signature from your pastor, it requires a statement that you don't smoke or drink regularly. So they can do whatever they want pretty much in terms of these restrictions. But yeah, health sharing ministries are lower in cost. Typically, they provide some different unique premium flex options. And so we actually pay per major medical event. It's not a running deductible that usually you would have to hit throughout a year. And so in terms of like for pregnancies, if you actually go and negotiate that you're self-pay patient, hospitals usually write off maybe 20-30% of the cost. And so that becomes kind of your deductible for the event. And so yeah, it's quite a bit cheaper than sometimes we call the Affordable Care Act, just the not so Affordable Care Act. So anyway, here's a little talk on the different options for some different accounts for investments or for retirement, sorry, healthcare need out there. So we'll talk a little bit about disability because it's an interesting topic. I've actually been able to do a little research on this topic before, and so I was going to show you a little bit of this, but sometimes it's the one that's forgotten because disability is not something that is typically brought up. And so disability insurance is actually a little bit more expensive unless you're covered in a group plan through your work, but it is a fairly strong likelihood that someone would go into disability. And what I've found, research I did with a cohort cluster mate of mine at Kansas State, is that people who do go into disability tend to stay there for longer than you might think. And it's actually pretty big deal in terms of income shock. So this was just an initial review of likelihoods of disability. And so over the course of a lifetime, there's about a 15% chance that someone would become disabled. Those are much higher for people who tend to work in manual labor jobs like Hispanic and Blacks. And with people who have less than high school education have a 28% chance of falling into disability according to this survey. And so ultimately, though, what it means is that, you know, while the chance of you ending up being in a disabling event is about 15% over the course of your lifetime, those people who do experience this don't ever really fully recover from it. And so usually disabling events last anywhere from 2 to 5 years, and that goes down with age, but their income shock and their ability to produce income over their lifetime never really recovers. So that black line there is showing someone who's never reported as disabled, and these yellow squiggles are showing the different years that they're reporting. So this would be like someone who reported disability earlier in the yellow. And then as we move down, it's going to be later years, up from 1983 to 2011. And you can see the story is earlier disability is actually a little bit more harmful for lifetime's earnings. There's a little bit of recovery there. But no matter what, no matter how you cut it, it's a pretty terrible thing because yeah, we can cover life insurance is a really simple, clean thing we can go out and purchase. It's very commonly found. Disability insurance is harder to find, and you can find policies on it, but it's actually a better group plan option than anything else if you have a workplace that provides for your need for that need, right? Because you think about the idea, like you go out for a bike ride, you hit your head, all of a sudden you can't think like you used to be able to, and maybe most of us wouldn't be able to do our job, right? Like that's actually but you're still around, you still have needs, actually maybe more needs, and now your spouse is left with the challenge of trying to figure out how to replace your income, how to provide for your needs, the family's needs, all of these other things. And so it's a really significant issue in our world, in our field, and something that probably does need to be addressed in the financial planning process, especially if someone is a manual laborer, and especially if they're at a high risk field. So I work with a lot of farmers, right, being in a rural community, and so it gets brought up whenever I meet with a farmer. I ask them, like, do you have disability insurance? Because that can be a significant challenge for them. Furthermore, their work is dependent upon all of their limbs. It's dependent upon their facilities as well, to be able to do the work that they do. And so because of that, you would want to try to find an own occupation policy. Yeah. Any questions about disability? It's kind of like the reason why I had a professor that asked me to do research on it is because like no one does research on it, was his thought. Like, and so it's very eye-opening to me to be able to kind of look into those numbers. Because you would think if insurance is doing what it should, or if someone has disability, apart, of course, this is all above and beyond what you'd be able to get maybe from SSDI. But it shows that these people don't have it, and it becomes a really, really challenging life without it, which is like that's why you have insurance, to cover those 1 in 10,000 events. Long-term care insurance is the next topic. So long-term care insurance is another really difficult topic, actually, because it's very difficult to find policies that are affordable. So even 10 or 12 years ago, you could buy long-term care insurance at a reasonable price from one of the big insurance providers. But long-term care costs grew exponentially, and a lot of them actually ended up folding on those arms of their businesses, to the point where there's not very many pure play long-term care options out there. So oftentimes we tell people, this is all rough estimate, but say you're age 60, you want to go out and buy it because you're seeing your family go through it. Like your mom is probably maybe going through something like she's in the nursing home, and you're seeing the costs, and just, it's crazy. And so you do is go out and, maybe you find a policy that's going to be able to provide for 3 years of long-term care need. It might cost you $16,000 a year. So like $16,000 a year starting at age 60 until you need it, or until you die. And so say you do need it, say you need it at age 80, you've paid $16,000 a year for 20 years for this policy. It's just the numbers don't really seem to add up, because long-term care insurance, the cost around here maybe is $60,000 to $70,000 a year. Well, if someone decided to invest those $16,000, right, and a year for 20 years, and grow that money, they'd have a heck of a lot more than what would be able to pay the $180,000 in need out of. So long-term care insurance can make sense. Policies can be considered, though. Like here's at least kind of a breakdown of that. You used to also be able to buy riders on other insurance products, and so we've got some old, call them dinosaur policies at our office, that have kind of 3 legs on them. They provide a basically a death benefit to the family, but then they also provide an increase in the amount, like an annuity, but it would provide a doubling or a tripling provision if someone does enter long-term care. And those products don't really exist anymore either, but anyway, they did. So here you see the question, is the client willing to deplete assets if needed, right? I think a lot of times nowadays we try to coach clients into the realization that they will probably need to do that. A lot of people can self-insure by that point when they've been retired and they're on the eve of life, because your Social Security checks are going to go straight to the long-term care need, and then of course any RMDs that you might have from retirement accounts might go into that, right? And then after that, it's just trying to piece up the rest of the funds that you would need to be able to pay for that long-term care. So here it says, if a client has this net worth between 250,000 and 1.5 million, those are the people that would consider a long-term care policy. And that is true. Like if you have a lot more than that, there's no need, right? Like you're self-insured. But there is a risk. Matter of fact, the biggest risk is when a spouse early in retirement goes into long-term care need and ends up being a very long need. Say they have dementia. And so all of a sudden they find themselves in that situation, well, their spouse is the one at risk, because now you have someone living in long-term care need, but you also have someone who still has a home and still has their own needs as well. And so what can potentially happen is that person can deplete that household's assets, which can be really challenging. And so that's one thing that we do try to kind of at least account for. And that's a argument to have things in retirement accounts, an individual retirement account, right? If I have mine, then even if my wife goes into long-term care, they won't be able to pull assets out of my IRA. Now they can put a lien on our house. They can take all the money out of the taxable accounts that we might have together in each of our names. But yeah, even trust planning, like a lot of times people think, well, I establish a trust so I don't have to go maybe pay into long-term care. And that's not always the case, right? Trust, they can still, matter of fact, long-term care has the power, those nursing homes have the power to go back, depending on your state, 3 or 5 years and pull, if you hadn't put money into that trust 3 or 5 years ago, they can actually still pull money back out of those and put a lien on your assets or your land or your house. So it is a pretty incredible challenge in our modern world. It's kind of developed, right, because of this fact that people are living longer, but longer isn't always healthier, and that sometimes means that you do have this this time when you're going to be in nursing care and need. And the last kind of talk is on the property and casualty, right? P&C is property and casualty, and that's usually, those are clustered because usually casualty is caused by some type of property or on a property or things like that. And so anyway, all that being said, it's helpful to kind of go back over the numbers, right, for like homeowners insurance. So one thing that I'm supposed to kind of note here is that trying to remember where it's at. It's the last page. Some things to look at, right, are the HO, the HO2, the HO3, right? So broad form versus special form is kind of a big deal there. So if someone's in HO2, a lot of times you want to recommend they go to HO3. And what that just means is there's probably just a likelihood of coverage that increases in homeowner 3 versus homeowner 2. And our world is getting more and more expensive. And so insurance companies are adding more and more provisions and more writing on homeowner policies, right? So like a lot of times the dwelling versus like roof, sometimes your roof is going to have a whole different kind of limit, deductible cost and things like that, because so many places are getting hit with hail and other types of damaging things that insurance companies are just adding these provisions hand over fist that make it harder, make the plan more complicated, but are a reality. So in terms of car and the homeowner, automotive, right? We always look at those three different numbers that you might have. Oh, this is talking about the difference between replacement costs. So still on homeowners insurance, right? You usually have two different options, the replacement value or the actual cash value. And so a lot of times the recommendation will be made that you should have the replacement value on your home, right? But you should also have the actual cash value on the possessions in your home. Because what's going to happen is if you really did have a totaling event and your house burned down, the things in your house are all pretty significantly depreciated, right? Because if you really did try to go sell them at a sale, you're not going to get much for this used thing or that used thing, right? So actual cash value is going to be able to carry a little bit more in terms of cost to be able to replace something.
I had a question on the information in the use case. It says that Aubrey's car insurance policy was 50-50-10. And I'm wondering if it should be 50-50-100. 10 seems pretty low for the third number.
Yeah. It should be it should be 100. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so we usually recommend right, at least 250 for the middle number. Let's see, let me think about this. The first number is per person, right? So they would pay 50,000 per person. The second number is the max number of dollar amount they'll pay, and then the third number would be the personal property damage max, right? So I think 150, 250, 150 is common. I was just reviewing my policy and mine's 250, 500, 250. And of course our insurance lady in her office likes those higher numbers. But she says there's not much of a trade down to go lower than that, even though I'd asked her about it. Especially whenever I was prepping for this class and my policy is I need to look over that anyway, because I need to pay for it. So anyway, all that being said, yeah, 50, 50, 100 for Aubrey. And there's a little bit of risk there, right? So she's a little underinsured. Umbrella policies have been brought up before. I don't know if I brought it up in here if someone is asking questions about it, but it would be really fitting for them, right? Because an umbrella policy would actually increase that middle number on their car insurance option, right? Because it would potentially fill that gap if something really catastrophic were to happen. In our world nowadays, with people texting and driving and doing other things while, just anything that would be considered negligent behind the wheel, there's a lot of significant risk there. And so umbrella policies do a lot of good things. If you live in a dense urban neighborhood, they could potentially cover that risk of something happening on your property, even though it's not your fault. It could also cover if you are a business owner and something was to happen, it could also cover that. And I was watching over Dr. Annette's video. He said a lot of umbrella policies actually come with basically, you purchase those and they come with your retainer for a lawyer as well, which is kind of cool. I thought that if something were to happen in our, kind of the tort world that we live in, where people are suing other people because their coffee's too hot or whatever the case may be, you feel a little bit more protected with a policy like that. Especially, I would say probably generally the more complex situation that you're in, find yourself with a long daily commute, that would be something that would be considered an umbrella policy to bridge that gap of $1 million or $2 million. I've always been told they're kind of inexpensive. By the way, if you wanted to actually go into getting some quotes for insurance needs, there's some good options there as well from termforsale.com, I think, is one that will give you some term rates without putting too much information in. A lot of them are trying to make that sales tool, so they're going to ask for all the stuff, and they're going to be pestering you if you put that in. Policy Genius is another one that sometimes people use, so you might look at those if you're just curious about some ballpark numbers, you know. Any questions? As I went through, when I went through my CFP coursework, I took insurance planning first. And so I always have this, it's interesting that we're going over it last. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of reshifting and reorienting the process or steps that I usually go through. And so it's kind of nice though to be able to be very familiar with their case as you go through insurance planning. And so in theory, the workload for this assignment, since you're already familiar with what else is going on, shouldn't be too hard. So that's a good thing. But yeah.
So I'm looking at the syllabus and it looks like there's 2 things due Sunday night. One of them's just for undergrad, and then the other one is a CFP ethics quiz.
Yeah, let me look at those real quick, Joe. So the CFP did have the mock exam. The CFP ethics quiz, I think, is something, yeah, that we're gonna want to take. I'm gonna make that due on Monday, of course, though. Okay, so
Well,
yep.
it's only 8 questions, so maybe not very
Yeah,
big.
it'll be pretty quick little thing. Yeah, let me double check now on that other aspect of things. So since this is dual listed, we have some people in the master's certification, some people in the undergrad coursework, right? There is the e-portfolio that's a requirement for undergrad students. I think it's kind of in the, what do you call it? The School of Business is requiring that they work on this portfolio. Okay. And so what it is kind of there for employers to look at. And so you basically what you do is you take examples from the class that we've done, probably the ones that you did, you know, from say in retirement planning class, right? You're going to take that and kind of put it into the portfolio, add a little cover page and things like that. Now for the, because that's the one that says e-portfolio undergrad students only, right?
Yeah.
Is there one that says, is there one about if you're not an undergrad? I don't think there is there?
No, I don't see one.
Okay. So so I'll be honest, I'm not actually even given that info in terms of who's in what class. So I assume most of our, I know most of you guys are all in the, not gonna have to worry about doing that. So. All right. Anything else?